The architecture of the Mughal and Delhi Sultanate empires was affected a whole lot by their origins, and quite obviously, the places where they were situated. I'm your disembodied voice lady, Arohi, and today we'll be looking at how cultural interactions during the Mughal and Sultanate eras affected their architecture, looking specifically at the Qutub complex and Humayun's tomb. The Delhi Sultanate and Mughal Empire were very close together in time, with the Mughal Empire succeeding the Delhi Sultanate, which is why their architecture sometimes had similar elements. Now, let's move on to the analysis of the monuments. Delhi Sultanate, Qutub Complex. The Qutub Complex, an area spanning about 28.8 acres, was a cultural hub with religious connotations and later administrative and political connotations. It was mostly made of red sandstone and in some areas white marble. Red sandstone was traditionally a Hindu material, with it being used extensively in Hindu temples because of its availability near the region. Early Delhi Sultanate architecture used a whole lot of red sandstone. The Qutub Minar's bricks are also made of red sandstone, which came from Rajasthan specifically. The first floor was made by Qutub al-Din Aibak, the second and third by his successor Iltutmish, and the fourth and fifth by Firoz Shah Tughlaq, who was of a different dynasty entirely. The Quat-ul Islam Mosque is made of a mix of red sandstone and white marble, which is, again, a characteristic of the Sultanate. It had a whole lot of pillars which were actually taken from pieces of destroyed Hindu temples. Pieces of 27 different Hindu and Jain temples were used to make the mosque pillars, which is why you'll notice pictures of idols and figures where there usually wouldn't be, considering Islam is a religion which doesn't particularly like idolatry. Most of these figures' faces have been carved out or hidden. This phenomenon of destroying temples and using spare parts was pretty common in the Delhi Sultanate. The iron pillar, which is situated in the mosque, is another interesting example of the evolution of architecture. The pillar was not originally situated in the mosque, but rather near present-day Mathura. It was made by Chandragupta II of the Gupta Empire and was moved by Anangpal Tomar to Delhi. It had inscriptions in Sanskrit about both Chandragupta II and Anangpal Tomar. It's interesting to see how a monument that was first made in 4th CE can travel across time and distance. Moving on to Mughal architecture, Humayun's tomb. The Humayun's tomb complex doesn't include only the monument, but also multiple other buildings and gardens. To make the complex, Persian artisans and architects were invited to India, which is why the Humayun's tomb has a lot of Persian influence. The char bagh format used for the gardens, which was also used for the Taj Mahal, was a Persian feature. Fun fact, did you know that the Taj Mahal was inspired by the Humayun's tomb? Well, inspired would be an understatement. They're practically copies, except for the fact that the Taj Mahal is completely white. A few other Persian elements include tiling work, used on the roof for the main dome and the smaller domes, and the onion-shaped domes and arches, which continued to be seen in later Mughal architecture. The tomb was, incidentally, also made of red sandstone and white marble. Seems the Sultanate and the Mughal Empire have that in common, their liking of red and white. The main walls were quartz, native to Delhi, and red sandstone, which, as mentioned before, was a remnant of Hindu temples. The tomb was covered in celestial symbols like suns and stars, and also in some places, the Star of David, which is a Jewish symbol. This is because of two reasons. The first reason is because Judaism and Islam come from the same roots, so they will interact occasionally. The second reason is the one I like better. A simple fact. Humayun was an astronomy nerd. Nice to see medieval emperors could be nerdy, although they wouldn't have called it that at the time. Not so fun fact. In Mughal tombs, men had pens, also known as kalamdan, on their tombs, while their wives had slates to signify how men could write their wives' destinies. Unmarried women had no slates, but unmarried men always had pens. Man, I'm so glad we don't believe old and archaic beliefs that say a man can control a woman. Oh wait. Humayun had no pen on his tomb, just because people already knew how important he was without it. Mughal tombs even later were always cenotaphs, which means that the tombs were just markers, while the bodies were actually 6 feet underground. The main tomb had a lot of interesting symbols that used to traditionally coincide with Hinduism. The lotus, which was traditionally a Hindu and Buddhist symbol of purity, was carved on the tomb, and the use of chhatris on the building, which was, again, traditionally a Hindu element, symbolized remembrance, and they were used to mark places where important people were cremated. Conclusion: the existing architecture of a place and the architecture from their origins has huge impacts on the architecture of an empire. We can see that when we closely examine their architecture and try to figure out which elements came from where. We looked at them closely today in this video through the example of the Qutub complex and Humayun's tomb. Ancient architecture plays a huge role in the coming generations, even today in the modern age. I hope this helped sate your curiosity, or even better, sparked more interest. Happy learning!